So hello everybody. Uh, we're gonna wait for a couple of minutes for everybody to join us. So hello everyone. I hope everybody can hear me and see me. So I'm Lovor Komaric from the Energy Institute Hrvoje Požar, member of the ENSMOV consortium, and we can slowly but surely, we can wait a couple more minutes for everybody to sign in, and then we can officially start. So hello everyone. Welcome to the ENSMOV Regional webinar, which focuses on the implementation of Article 7 in countries of Southeastern Europe through energy efficiency obligation schemes and alternative measures. My name is Lovor Komaric. I'm working at the Department for Energy Efficiency at the Energy Institute Hrvoje Požar in Zagreb, Croatia. We're working on the Horizon 2020 project called ENSMOV. This webinar is co-organized by the ENSMOV consortium and by the energy community. The webinar will first introduce a general overview of EEOs and alternative measures at the EU level. Afterwards, a representative of the energy community and a representative of ECA, David Williams, will report on the updates regarding the implementation of Article 7 in energy community countries, while in the second half, the webinar will focus on specific examples of EEOs and alternative measure implementation in Bulgaria and Croatia. So we're hoping that these examples will stimulate discussions on the most effective ways to fulfill these Article 7 obligations in energy community countries and beyond. So according to the schedule, the floor will be transferred to Vlasis Oikonomou from IECP, which will give you the introduction of the project ENSMOV. So Vlasis, I'm just going to give you Mhm.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, yeah. Hmm.
Perfect. Okay. And I guess you can also see my screen, eh? Right.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay. Perfect. So thank you very much, Lovorka. Thanks to all the members for organizing this very interesting event. My name is Blas Sikodomu, and together with my colleague Ivana Rogouli, who will be presenting later on, we are from the ICP, which is based in the Netherlands, and yeah, we're actually located in several countries in the EU. And we are the coordinators of this European Union-funded Horizon 2020 program called ENSMOV. ENSMOV, in essence, you can, the full title, of course, it's quite long, but it has to do with two main elements. It's to implement policies and also monitor and verify the outcomes of these policies for the fulfillment of the Article 7 EED obligations, which in essence are the strict, are the core of the energy saving obligations from the Energy Efficiency Directive. Now, the main objectives of these ones, and here I would like you to stick to that, is that we are, as a group and as a consortium, we are mainly not in the course of controlling member states, but our work here is to help and share knowledge with member states and experiences to implement the policies under the Article 7. So as I said, it's very important to keep in mind that what we try to do is we try to have a lot of various type of exchanges. Normally it should be physical exchanges, but due to COVID, of course, everything has been transferred to online, and that's why we have a lot of them. And the idea, as I said, behind everything is to help you better implement, provide insights to better implement the policies that you are required and to achieve your targets in a more effective and cost-effective also way. The second part of the second objective of ENSMOV is to provide you with a lot of resources and tools for implementing the Article 7 ED. So it is not only about exchanging between between the other countries, but it's also to have a palette of various tools that you can make use of. And by tools, we mean about clarifications that could be on the law, or even some best practices and how you can exactly replicate them in your countries. For instance, addressing difficult issues such as additionality or such as state aid rules or such other relevant issues. And then the last one is actually to assist all the national authorities to better to implement, if you have not done so, or to elaborate and develop further your in-house monitoring, reporting, and verification schemes, which is a very important parameter for the fulfillment and for the demonstration of the fulfillment of the targets toward the European Union. And then in order to help you have, of course, better data, better analysis of the data from the eligible parties that participate in your obligation schemes or also in the other policies, and also to help you design the policies for the 2030 period onwards. So these are the three key objectives of ENSMOV. These are the partners who, as you can see, I mean, from those you can recognize, a lot of them are energy agencies themselves, national energy agencies, but also some other research institutes around the field and some technical chambers. So what we try to do is not just work on a policy only level, but also try to include the stakeholders' views and help the stakeholders and the market players to accept, let's say, first of all, the policies you plan to implement, but also to participate more actively and generate the savings you need, we all need as countries. Now, this is ENSMOV, is part of practically is a baby born out of two projects, out of ENSMOV, which was an older project, again, for the Article 7 EED. And both actually ENSMOV and ENSMOV were towards stakeholders. And just now, I mean, we are looking at 2030 period and beyond, and we focus more on the MRV and policy implementation and also on the alternative measures you can use. And multi-E was another project which was mainly on the MRV schemes, and several countries have benefited from it, also such as Croatia, as Lovorko just mentioned before. Now, for what we did and how we started, in order not to start from our own knowledge, we have carried out a needs assessment with several member states, and also I think some of you have also replied to that. And we try to understand what are the challenges your colleagues in other countries and you, of course, face when you will try to implement the Article 7 of the EED. And just here, just to highlight that some of the key challenges faced is mainly to get the political support for implementing an energy efficiency obligation scheme, which can be the highest because you have to persuade people that they have to carry out further costs in their own business activities. Then to ensure the sustainability of the scheme, mainly if you are already working on some policies, you have to find out ways how to further move on with them in the next periods. And then how to make your policies complementary so that the one does not overlap with the other. And this, of course, has to do with the way that you have to report things to the Commission. And obviously the policy budget, the budget commitments, which is one of the biggest hurdles, of course, because we don't have endless budgets. And budgets have to be optimized in a way of what type of support schemes must be generated next to the energy efficiency obligation scheme. And of course, when it comes to the monitoring and verification, the key issues we have seen is, first of all, is it's quite difficult to set requirements such to demonstrate the baseline. Like what we say with baseline is what would have happened without the implementation of the policy. This is, of course, very difficult by itself. And then other key problems we face is the lack of staff, which is fully understandable, and the burden on the administrative level, so the costs that need to be carried out for having a proper monitoring scheme. So here is just a snapshot of the various type of events we're organizing. Of course, you'll be welcome in all of them, and you will be receiving already invitations for all the types of events. Just to give you an idea, for the first cycle, which closed this year actually, we've had several types of exchanges and types of webinars, which everything is accessible, like on the cost effectiveness for the energy efficiency policies, monitoring and verification toolkits, like what types of specific elements you can use to develop an MRV scheme, financial aspects, like how to finance these schemes and pricing. So these were some of the events we have, and of course we also have ad hoc events, and here we would like to ask you to guide us and provide us the demand. So what exactly you need, we're happy to provide. So for instance, what type of events we are parallel having to the normal cycle events is that we had 2 days ago one with fuel suppliers under the energy efficiency obligation schemes. Then we have some events on the COVID-19, which will be in January, the recovery fund and just transition mechanism and how this can be used for the Article 7 EED targets. Cost effectiveness of EO schemes in February will be held. And then, of course, one on taxation measures. And as I said, we are developing, we can have plenty of ideas. So if you have specific requests from us, please go ahead and contact your national administrations and they can come back to us and we can provide support. And then we also have one platform which is being launched before Christmas, is the Article 7 ED, where you have a lot of resources for all types of information you might need for the Article 7 ED implementation and how to tackle specific elements of that, like the additionality, materiality, as I said, financing and and all difficult aspects that you have to face when implementing the policies. Then we also have a lot of national reports at the national level policy reports, other materials from conferences, workshops, or webinars, and policy recommendations, and of course guidelines. So I would say that you will be notified with an email, of course, when the platform is launched, and this will be kind of a central hub for all types of information of the articles regarding the Article 7 ED implementation. These are our contact points, which you can. It's me, Vlasis Antivan, as I said. And please visit our website, LinkedIn, and everything, and subscribe to the newsletter, as a lot of new inputs are coming up about the implementation of the Article 7. I know I've been shorter than in this 8, but I think this was the intention, so to leave more space to you to discuss with the other countries. Thank you very much, Lovorko, for the time.
Thank you, Vlasis. So the next presentation is by Ivana Rogul. There you go. I can see you, Ivana. So when you're ready.
Okay, I've been muted, sorry. So here is just to turn it on. Okay, so very warm welcome to everyone to the webinar, and just a second to be able to. Okay. And thank you, Lavoka, for the introduction. As I've already been presented, I'm a colleague of Lassus working in the ICP, an Institute for European Energy and Climate Policy, and we are the coordinator of the ENSMOV project. And as was already mentioned, we are working from different places in Europe, and I'm based in Croatia, so the situation in South and Eastern Europe is something that I'm very much familiar with. My idea today was just to show you what our colleagues have implemented and have shown us and collected the information about during the project status analysis. So our colleagues from other countries in the European Union have collected the information on how Article 7 and monitoring and verification is implemented in those countries, and based on that we are creating a report. And this is something I'm going to tell a bit more about, just to show you the overview of the measures in the European countries and to maybe give some of you the ideas on how the measures are implemented. So anyways, just to start, let's say, from the beginning, to have an overview of the Energy Efficiency Directive, although I guess most of you are very much familiar with the subject. The Energy Efficiency Directive has been the part of the third energy package in 2012 and had the energy savings goal to 2020. And here with the 2018 changes of the directive, we have the new goal of 32.5% savings to 2030 in the European Union. And this is supposed to be achieved through several different measures, and some of those, the most prominent and interesting ones are shown here. So, and you probably had some contact with most of them. One of those is the obligation to renovate 3% of public buildings with the long-term plan, with the development of the long-term plan for renovation of the privately owned households and buildings. This is something that's been updated and will be shown as a part of the Renovation Wave legislative framework. Then we have the obligation to roll out of 200 million smart meters, so to implement the changes of the grid to be able to implement the demand side management and to have the easier implementation of energy efficiency measures and renewable energy. Of course, there is also an obligation to include certification either for the buildings and apartments and also energy labeling for the different kind of equipment. Then we also have the obligation to protect the rights of consumers by informing them on not only the amount of energy they are consuming, but also on the ways they are consuming energy to be able to implement the behavioral changes in their everyday life to influence the energy efficiency. And then something that I think would be also interesting to you, we and ICP are currently implementing one project related to Article 8 of the Energy Efficiency Directive. It's called ENSMOV. And Article 8 is the obligation of the member states to propose to the big companies to implement energy audits. And these are the companies that have more than 250 employees and more than 15 million euros of annual turnover, or 40 million in a balance sheet, whatever those conditions is implemented. Anyways, we are currently working on implementing something similar or some kind of motivation by the member states to the small and medium enterprises and help to the small and medium enterprises. So something that also might interest you, and this is related to Article 8. And now the thing that we are talking about today, the obligation schemes for energy companies to achieve yearly energy savings, which are including energy retailers or sellers or energy distributors, depending on how this article is transposed. And it also, of course, includes energy efficiency obligation schemes plus alternative measures proposed by the member state, which we are going to talk a bit more about during the presentation. So what is interesting, I guess, at the moment is that after implementation of the European Green Deal, there is an ongoing evaluation and the changes of the whole legislative framework. And this also includes the directive of energy efficiency for energy efficiency. And at the moment, it's not completely, of course, clear in which direction and whether the directive will change a lot. But anyways, the evaluation of it is in progress, and the revision is planned for the second quarter of 2021. Something which is also relevant for the implementation of the obligation scheme and the alternative measures, so the whole energy efficiency related measures, is the directive related to the governance of the energy union, and of course integrated national energy and climate plans, which you're also very familiar with, which include the part related to energy efficiency, and the measures for energy efficiency from the plan are those which are also linked to energy efficiency directive. So something relevant to know also while dealing with Article 7. So, and for the Article 7, the 2012 directive proposed the annual reduction of 1.5% in national energy sales from 2014 to 2020, and this has been changed to 0.8% annual final energy consumption, but this is for the average energy for the last 3 years prior to the development of the updates, so prior to the implementation of the updates. You already heard a bit on what we are doing and what are the subject of the knowledge transfer and peer-to-peer learning in ENSMOV project, but these are actually linked to the obligations that are deriving from Article 7, like to taking care of the additionality. So the additionality meaning that the measures that are implemented are addition to the measures that would be implemented in any other baseline case. The materiality of the activities requirements that are of course, ensuring some quality standards on the level of the countries, also the calculation of the measures and so on. And with the updates, there is something also interesting now. So the issue of the energy poverty is a lot more, let's say, elevated in the 2018 update. And now most of the countries have a specific calculation of savings if the savings are deriving from the measures that are implemented in energy poor households. And there is also an ongoing discussion, which is also it's also mentioned in the discussion for the eventual changes in the directive, and it's the way the savings are calculated from the perspective of the lifetime of the measure. So the accounting of the savings depends also, of course, of the lifetime of the measure, and this is something that's generally a subject of discussion. So, since my objective today is to tell a bit on how the measures are implemented in European countries, let's say then what are the ways that they can be implemented. So, either through energy efficiency obligation schemes, which means that companies have to carry out measures, and these measures have to help final consumers to improve their energy efficiency. But besides that, European countries may also implement alternative policy measures, which will help achieve the goals related to the Article 7, but do not have to be imposed directly on the on the energy retailers, energy suppliers and distributors. So these measures also could include, for example, energy and CO2 taxes, which are, I don't know, very much popular in some of the European countries and are implemented, for example, in Sweden as the key energy efficiency alternative policy measure. Then there are a lot of financial incentives that lead to increased use of energy efficiency. I think we're going to hear a bit more about them in the examples from our countries that are that will be presented today. And there are also regulations or voluntary agreements. You will hear in the countries from the European Union that a lot of them had also voluntary agreements with the companies before they implemented the energy efficiency obligation scheme. So they already had some ongoing measures which led to the obligation schemes. There is also energy labeling schemes beyond the ones that are defined in the energy labeling directive. So the ones that are, let's say, implementation of the labeling or of the standards, international standards, like, for example, ISO 50001, which are above those that are defined in the directive. And then, of course, a lot of countries, for example, also, I think a lot of Southeastern European countries through the, I don't know, UNDP program and other programs already have implemented a lot of energy advisory programs, trainings and education, which can also be accounted as alternative measure. This could, for example, be training and education of public employees, something like that, authorities for the implementation of the measures. I've chosen several countries just to do a bit of presentation of an overview what's happening in the European Union. First one is Austria, which, as you see from here, it has both energy efficiency obligation scheme and the alternative measures. And I'm going to tell you a bit about their obligation scheme. So it started in January 2015, and in Austria, as mentioned, as in several other countries, it's something that followed up the voluntary agreements between the companies and member states that were already ongoing. And the targets for the obligation scheme are set to 0.6% of the reported final energy consumption from the final consumers of the specific supplier. And 40% of this has to be achieved in the household sector, meaning not only the apartments, so the buildings and the houses, but also the private transport sector. So in any ways they can motivate households, and they can help households achieve measures in the transport sector. The energy savings reported between 2014 and 2017 for Article 7 contribute cumulatively with 136 petajoules to the target of 218. So it seems very relevant, and it's not so as you may see, it's from 2014 to 2017. So these last years are not incorporated in the final calculation, so it will contribute to the final savings target even more. And 37.3% at the end of these calculated savings derive from the action in households. So they've almost achieved the target of 40% being implemented in the household sector. And as I said, the energy poverty is also included in the scheme. So the households affected by the energy poverty, the resulting end-use energy savings are multiplied by the factor 1.5. So for every kilowatt hour saved in the energy poor households, the contribution to the final goal is 1.5. This is very motivating for the companies to invest in energy poor households, because besides having this situation that it's attributed more, it's also easier to, let's say, achieve savings if the baseline situation, it's, let's call it, even less less good, or let's say worse at the beginning, so the same measures would achieve bigger savings. Then for the these are the graphs at the right side, where you can see that the shares of accumulated energy savings are besides energy efficiency obligation schemes, there are also energy taxes, so alternative measures, housing, energy and environmental subsidies, so environmental funding and so on. So these are the alternative measures that Austria is also using to achieve the complete Article 7 objective. Then a bit about Greece. The scheme started in 2012, and there is a much difference between this one and the scheme in Austria. But as you may see, it's mostly used and mostly implemented in the transport sector, and the most relevant achievers are the oil product companies, which have 59% of the share of the cumulative savings. I think this difference between Austria and Greece, it's I think very relevant for all of us to see how different measures could be appropriate for different member states and different countries. And the scheme started a bit later in 2017, and in the first period, the energy efficiency obligation scheme will be equal to 10% of the total target, so everything else is achieved through other alternative measures. As I said, so the highest portion is achieved through transport sector, and 30% savings are achieved in electricity and 6% in natural gas. So these are the companies that are actually achieving the savings. This is not related only to the final measures that have been achieved. And per sector, there is also this very different situation than in Austria. So the residential sector is 25%, tertiary sector 8%, and industry around 7%. And we can see from the lower right graph that they've overachieved during the period until 20. In Ireland, the Irish obligation scheme started even earlier in 2014, and it has a new annual primary target equivalent for 2017 of 622 gigawatt hours per year with sub-targets. So they've divided their target to the sub-targets in specific sector, and 20% of it has to be achieved in household sector, so in residential sector. And they've also have the target for the energy per household. So in comparison to the other countries that are actually not having the specific target for the energy per households, they are actually always attributing more savings to them. In the case of Ireland, they also have this obligation of 5%, so the companies are obliged to also include energy for energy per households in the scope, sorry. They've also developed 50 standardized actions, and in cooperation with the companies that are already seen by their agency as companies that are working for a long time and with good references in the sector, they are implementing these 50 standardized actions. And for these 50 standardized actions with the companies that are already familiar in the country and in the sector, they're kind of repeating this as something that doesn't have to be ever rechecked for application on every case-to-case basis. If there are other sectors involved and if there are other measures involved, then they are reviewing it on case-to-case basis. And these are the savings in their case. So anyways, 70% of the target is attributed to non-residential sectors, and at the end even more has been achieved in those sectors. And we can see from the graph below that and on the average they are achieving their saving targets. I'll also go through a few alternative measures. One of them is from Germany. Germany has the competitive funding program, which is called Energy Efficiency and Process Heating from Renewable Energies in Business. We also evaluated this program from the perspective of state aid. I guess it's very interesting. You can see more about the state aid in Article 7 from one of the reports on the ENSMOV website. This is something that I think let's say interests a lot of countries, how to work in granting and in helping companies achieving their targets, and all the other, of course, actors, not only companies but also buildings and so on, to kind of achieve their targets and to be in compliance with the state aid legislative framework. So this is something that we will also analyze, and you can check it on our website. And this is one of the measures that has been evaluated from that perspective, on how they in Germany managed to help the companies that are working on the market with energy efficiency and to comply with the state aid regulation. So the programs refers to the CO2 emissions reduction. So they're not only aiming in reducing the electricity, but also other energies and also CO2. So if it's CO2 reduction, that it also includes the changes of the fuel, so the effectiveness of the fuel and the factors that fuels of the CO2 the fuels are producing, so relevant from that perspective also. And projects which are eligible for funding are selected from the open competition. This is also something that's relevant for state aid. So they are selecting from the open competition and they are choosing it by the cost-benefit ratio. So how much funding the project needs versus how much tons of CO2 is going to be saved. And actually, the funding is around less than 50%, which is top percentage, and it's a non-refundable grant. And companies that can apply are either private or publicly owned companies, some freelance companies, contractors that are contracting other companies, and so on. And eligible measures are actually related to technology. So these are highly efficient technologies in industry, for example, and increasing of share of renewables for the provision of process heat, so heat waste, heat recuperation, and so on. So these are mostly technologically advanced measures. And one other, I think, interesting alternative measure is the one in Hungary. They have corporate tax relief for energy efficiency investment in industry. It was introduced in 2017, and the tax incentive can be up to 30% of the eligible costs. For the eligible costs of the measure, the 30% can be deducted from the taxes, but not more than 50 million euros in forints. So this is the highest amount. Of course, this can only be used for the projects that have energy efficiency improvement that are above the let's say the current legislative threshold. So this is something that's also relevant. I will repeat that one also for the state aid. The legislative framework related to the state aid obliges the implementer to achieve the energy efficiency goals which are higher than the ones that are prescribed by the legislative framework. So, for example, if you're okay according to the current standards and you find it energy efficient, it's not an implementation of energy efficiency measures because it's only linked to the current legislative framework. It has to be above the current situation. Besides that, I've also put here some other measures that Hungary has to see how some of the countries combine different alternative measures. For example, they have a lot of non-refundable, and this is something that's happening also in a lot of other countries. So in the operational programs for European structural investment funds, they have different supports for different target groups. So either companies, public buildings, local authorities, and so on, and different action types. For example, in residential sector, they have green financing schemes, which is linked to the non-refundable support. And this is financed from the ETS. This is also something that's common in the different countries, because the ETS legislation obliges the countries to use the funding from the auction for the measures that are related to climate change, so that are influencing the mitigation of the climate change. They also have zero interest residential loan schemes from the development banks, and they are also funded through the operational programs. This is something that European Union is always kind of promoting as something of their interest. So they're always motivating member states to develop financial incentives and financial schemes, and to kind of develop the market, not to only give grants for the various and different energy efficiency measures. Then they also have corporate tax relief. That's something that I've already mentioned, and they also oblige the large companies to have energy manager. And of course, a bit of transport measures, which is support to electric vehicles and electric mobility, also linked to ETS, and the development of alternative and active transport. That's an overview of some countries of the European Union and how they implement Article 7. Now, as I said, we are waiting for the revision and actively participating in the revision of the directive. And also, as the overall target for energy efficiency will rise and the other whole legislative framework is being reevaluated and developed, it will possibly influence the Article 7 targets, and also the way the measures are implemented based on the other legislation that's being developed at the moment. And also, as Vlasis mentioned, we are doing a lot of work with the new things that are important at the moment. For example, Recovery and Resilience Fund, and how it can help with the implementation of the alternative measures and so on. But I've stated here the one that we are developing at the moment, so the COVID-19 and economic crisis, since I think it's relevant from the perspective of the possible rebound effect, because what we are researching and what we are viewing from the literature and from the International Energy Agency and so on, it seems if the Article 7 and all the other goals from the Energy Efficiency Directive have fallen like in the ladder of importance, and now we are we are actually waiting for the next period where the rebound effect will happen, and the work that we are doing and you are doing as countries in the implementation of the Energy Efficiency Directive will be much more important and maybe even more challenging. And that's it for me. Thank you very much. If you, of course, I hope that the discussion will happen at the end, and that we'll have the possibility to discuss a bit more about the things that you are interested in.
Thank you very much, Ivana. And thank you to Vlasis, both from IACP. We're a bit ahead of schedule, but I suggest that we move to the part of David Williams's presentation. But before that, would Energy community. Violeta or Borko, would you like to have a short introduction to the next part of the webinar? I hope you can hear us.
Do you hear me?
Yes, Borko, we can hear you.
Hello. Good morning, and yeah, thank you for the invitation and this opportunity to jointly organize the event related to implementation of Article 7. I'm the energy efficiency expert in the Energy Community Secretariat, and we are also trying to implement first to transpose the Energy Efficiency Directive and implement Article 7 in member countries, which are neighboring EU countries, so Western Balkan countries, Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine, and with some times shift in implementation, and also we are relying very much on assistance from technical assistance to countries, because this is one of the most complex articles for implementation, and thus we also invited Dave today to present experience from the Regional Energy Efficiency Program, and which is most advanced in supporting the countries in implementation of Article 7, and hopefully representatives of our member states who are also attending today will have a chance to discuss further and to pose some questions. Thank you.
Morning all. I have just worked out how to turn on my camera. I was hoping to hide my face for this. I hope you can see the presentation slide that I've got on the screen. Lavorko, please shout if it's not showing on your...
Yes, it's all right. We can see it.
I see everybody else has got nice office backgrounds, whereas stuck in lockdown England here, you've got my cloakroom behind me, so not quite as professional. I do apologise. Okay, I was asked, as Borko mentions, to give a little overview of our attempts and challenges and opportunities in trying to get Article 7 implemented in the energy community countries and the contracting parties, and where they are at. To give a bit of background on myself, I've also helped in Ireland, as well as some work both in Croatia and Bulgaria. And what I see really is that the challenges are the same everywhere. It's the degree that the challenge is present that can vary. So it's not necessarily a new challenge, it can just be more of a particular challenge. So scrolling down, a quick overview of what Article 7 is for contracting parties, because the transposed directive is different to the original one in a few forms. It's a shorter period, 2017 to 2020, rather than 2014 to 2020, which in cumulative terms has a big impact because it's only a 10 times accumulation. And the new savings equivalent target is substantially smaller. It's not 1.5% of the reference quantity, but 0.7%. The same kind of reductions that are allowed still apply. However, as you'll see, because of the starting point of a lot of contracting parties compared to many EU member states, it's still probably a more, or was a more onerous obligation to be set, and not one that we have a particularly happy story so far to talk about, but hopefully what we can do through this kind of workshop and elsewhere is understand a way of being better prepared and having more successful delivery for the next 10 years, for the period to 2030. The 2030 target hasn't yet been set for contracting parties, as a revised directive has not yet been formally transposed, but it seems inevitable it is going to be substantially more onerous again than the 2021 was, even if you maintain a similarly low new savings equivalent target. Simply the fact you've got a 10-year period of accumulation will create a much more challenging environment, but also give more time. And I think that's been one of the problems, just a lack of time to develop political buy-in, political will, to develop programs slowly. That sort of hampered efforts somewhat. So only Serbia actually sent its formal notification. In the transposed directive, it was supposed that contracting parties would send by the 15th October 2017. And as I say, only Serbia actually sent one, and it was formally only done start of this year. So for other contracting parties, information I've got in the next slide that you'll see has been derived from their annual reports on implementation of the Energy Efficiency Action Plan, where they do make reference to Article 7, not in the kind of systematic reporting fashion that member states have in that Excel spreadsheet that's delivered back, but more just sort of sporadic information and references to programs that they believe to be eligible and some energy savings figures against them. So what have been the big barriers? Why have we not had more? That's hopefully what we're going to look at in this presentation, with some ideas on how that might be improved for the 2030 period. So here's a quick snapshot of the types of programs that are mentioned in the annual reports with relation to Article 7, or in the National Energy Efficiency Action Plans in relation to Article 7 as being intended to be used for evidencing by each of the contracting parties. So I think there's a few takeaways here. EEOs have been considered and are included as an option in the primary legislation for almost all the contracting parties. However, only Bosnia has made a firm commitment to actually using one to evidence its 2020 target. And even in Bosnia, I understand all the secondary legislation is ready. I'm not sure it's fully been adopted yet. What's tended to happen is while at primary legislation drafting stage, there's been an interest, there's been an acceptance that these are a major policy tool used in a lot of member states. Those kind of challenges, particularly in relation to political will and political buy-in, as well as the complexity and capacity for implementing, have the fears kicked in, and a step back's been taken at that point. Instead, what we see has been a reference to financing mechanisms, existing or pre-existing IFI or donor mechanisms, so things such as what the EBRD themselves support, as well as national EE funds. These are either already established or planned to be established in almost all of the contracting parties. The World Bank is heavily involved in helping establish them. They've generally got a public sector focus initially, with future ambitions to move into the residential sector. I think Ukraine's an outlier there in that it already is looking at the residential sector. And other financing schemes, these relate to kind of municipality grant schemes that are available. But they tend, despite the large number of references to such schemes, the overall level of finance within them is relatively small still, and not close to being sufficient to deliver a large chunk of their Article 7 targets. The other big area of reference is eco-design, and eco-design is not an obligation of the energy community. It's not been a transposed directive, and therefore that baseline as a minimum standard within Annex 5 of the EED that relates to eco-design, forming a base above and beyond which you must achieve savings, is excluded from the transposed version of the directive. And that means eco-design at the moment is, as we read, an eligible measure for contributing towards targets. And that's really a big benefit to trying to bridge some of that huge gap that is currently being experienced in the countries between what their current mechanisms are delivering and what their targets are. And while it may sound like a loophole, it's a very valid one. It will have a big impact getting eco-design, and having eco-design eligible under Article 7 is encouraging these contracting parties to move forward with its adoption more quickly than I believe they would have done otherwise. Nevertheless, it may become mandatory in the future, and it is not on its own entirely sufficient. So there's more to be done. There's still a potential role for EEOS, or we need other big ticket items to bridge the gap. Just one other comment on experiences I've had in trying to assist contracting parties in establishing their progress against the 2020 targets to date. It's extraordinarily difficult, and I'm sure this is the same issue that's been found elsewhere, but perhaps more acutely in contracting parties. As I alluded to at the start, the challenges are the same, but just more exaggerated. And that's, firstly, there's a real lack of data in order to undertake both either top-down or bottom-up evaluations upon measures that have been implemented to date. Getting hold of the data in anything but the most aggregated of fashions is very challenging. The IFI programs have some good data, but it is not systematically delivered and shared with the ministries in a centralized fashion. So until those kind of processes are in place, reporting is going to be very difficult. And really, it seems to me very much that to do this properly, M&V has to be in place at the start, not something that can be backfitted, trying to scrape around to find data from previously enacted measures. So that's a real lesson learned for 2030, and should be a real priority for contracting parties to get in place for when the revised EED is transposed. And that's not just monitoring; it's verification. Even with the support, and I know GIZ and EIHP have been supporting the contracting parties with getting a very good M&V platform in place, and the challenge has been more getting people to use it and getting the training up. Hopefully, we're getting there now, and that is happening, as I understand. But then there's also the need for verification, those backup verification process to actually be getting undertaken so that evidencing is compliant with the requirements of the directive. Okay, just to give a bit of background on why it's been such a challenge. This is a figure I made previously elsewhere, for Ireland it was, looking at what are the big ticket alternative measures plus EOS within member states for delivering Article 7 targets. Eagle-eyed amongst you will see already that this is not a comprehensive list. It is got a bit of a Western European focus because of where we were looking at the time. But what it shows is that you've got a set of about 7 or 8 types of measure that really can deliver what we had as a threshold there, at least 15% of the target. And that the reason for looking at this is, as I say, there's very few pre-existing policies within the contracting parties that are big ticket items for delivering towards Article 7. And so we want to say, what are our options to try and narrow the scope from those 500 or so measures that have been notified across all of the member states? What are the most promising options we should be looking at as potentially relevant for contracting parties? And so a good way to narrow that is which are the ones that are delivering at scale in the EU. And what you look at when you see all these, if you then look at what's being considered or is already in place within the contracting parties, they really only fall into these two camps. That is grant and loan schemes, either those IFI financing mechanisms or the National Energy Efficiency Funds, predominantly funded through a combination of taxation and donors, or regulations. And by regulations, I'm talking about minimum standards, and that's the eco-design. And that's funded through industry at the end of the day, because industry directly must meet the requirements. Where there's been a gap is, and that real political challenge is getting acceptance of the idea of levies on bills. There has been in Serbia a levy upon energy bills that indirectly, it's not directly hypothecated, but indirectly funds the energy efficiency fund there. And Bosnia's proposed EEOS, of course, would come through. But they're the only two examples. And incidentally, those are two of the ones that would deliver at more scale in the energy community. I don't think it's impossible barrier. Feed-in tariff schemes for renewable energy do the same thing after all, and they have got there in the end. And as Serbia showed, you know, it is possible, but it is undoubtedly the one, alongside capacity, I'd say, the greatest barrier that we've faced. And just to kind of illustrate graphically what that means in terms of meeting the Article 7 target, well, if you take out EEOS, and energy and CO2 taxes are also extremely politically difficult to get buy-in for, then you're taking out a good half of your playing field for options of measures to deliver on targets, and no wonder then that you're left with a ramp-up challenge. And while eco-design, not labeling, because labeling is a requirement of contracting parties, while eco-design in the near term may help fill that gap, it is likely to become mandatory. There's a point at which it's no longer anyhow genuinely additional, and so there is a need for that next step. There is a need for trying to work through what are our options and committing to our options for a scalable measure that can help meet the targets. And the sooner the commitments are made to do that, to allow for that slow build up in targets if it's an EOS scheme, the easier that process is going to be, and the lower the chances at 2030 we'll have the same situation that we've had for 2020. Now, there is one benefit, I suppose, from having this somewhat blank slate that contracting parties have regarding measures, and that's the idea of creating a cohesive and consistent policy mix may be more achievable, because it's not trying to sort of lever together pre-existing policies with one new one stuck on the side just to meet the target. Looking at them sectorally, making sure that the real largest areas of untapped EE opportunity and where the market failures are most present are where activity is directed is possible. And so what we've been trying to do with contracting parties is, yes, first look at existing alternative measures and see what amongst them can help contribute towards 2020 and 2030. Then looking very much at the 2030, because 2020 really came too quick. I think the conversation, a lot of prime. Hi, sorry, I got muted by the organizer. I don't know if I'm going beyond time. Please do shout it.
Sorry about that, Dave. No, it was just a technical.
Okay, no,
Sorry.
good. I hope I wasn't bothering people that much.
No, quite the opposite. Quite the opposite.
Thank you. Yes, really saying, look, 2020 did come too quick. primary legislation was in the end only passed, I think, in Macedonia, in Georgia in the last year. In Albania, the revised primary legislation is still going through. You know, then there's a secondary to come. Getting all this through for 2020 and getting the political buy-in that was needed, and the utilities buy-in as well as the ministerial, but the utility buy-in really was a bridge too far. But we do, for 2030, there is that longer term perspective that can be taken. And so even in looking at 2020 targets, we've actually been talking to contracting parties to say, take a 2030 perspective here. That's what's probably most important to you. You can't do much about 2020 anymore. Take a 2030 perspective. Think about whether an EEO is desirable for as part of that, and then we can work out how one can be integrated more gradually and therefore on a more solid base. And then really, what is the acceptable level of impact on tariffs and the like that an EEO can withstand, notwithstanding the fact that benefits far outweigh costs, and we try and make that always clear. The benefits for energy bill savings are much greater very quickly than the costs that will be imposed under almost all scenarios. Nevertheless, there's of course a political difficulty with that whole idea of a levy on a bill, and so that's got to be limited, and that limits the overall target that can be delivered through an EOS. So then looking at what other mechanisms fit alongside it in that cohesive way, in that way where they can either leverage off each other. So for example, an information campaign leveraging an EO scheme. You may have co-funding possibilities like in Ireland, whereby low-income households are really supported both through the EOS and through the government grant schemes. And that helps keep the cost to the obligated parties of the energy poor activity much lower than they would be otherwise. Or it may be trying to keep a bit of a sectoral division. So saying, okay, your energy efficiency fund's going to concentrate on the public buildings. How about having the EEOS concentrate upon the residential sector? Just to avoid that overlap that can result in inefficiencies. So yes, looking alongside what other big ticket, if it's not an EOS, what other big ticket items are on the table for consideration for helping deliver on Article 7? So I've just go through three of those big ticket ones initially, one being the EEOS, noting the primary legislation is there now in most countries for one to be set up, and it's a secondary legislation and all that other guidance and political buy-in and utility buy-in that's needed. And the main constraints we've seen, the policy guidelines we've published with the Energy Community Secretariat goes into these in much more detail, but the headline issues, the perceived cost, that's clear. Yes, you can push on the benefits a lot, but there is that political difficulty of levies on bills. The capacity within, and this has been a real issue, I think, it's just seen as quite a complex undertaking to get in place, and having the capacity within the ministry or the agency that's responsible. Often we've been dealing with agencies where the personnel has been changing. There's only been one or two people anyhow, and yeah, really just there hasn't been that consistency for any one person to champion this and take it forward. But I feel we're getting there in some places now. And compliance, I've called it compliance. I think more generally getting the buy-in from utilities who are not so familiar with energy efficiency, unlike in some of the other schemes like Ireland or Austria, where you had the voluntary mechanisms in place that had more gradually pulled utilities into the energy efficiency sphere. In the region of the contracting parties, there has been less history of their involvement in EE programs, and so getting their buy-in is a longer process, but we have them involved in all the stakeholder workshops that we've run, and that process really needs to continue, and I think with patience it's possible to get there. I mentioned eco-design as one of the other big ticket options. Energy labeling is already a requirement. It makes complete sense to have eco-design. If you've got energy labeling, they pull and push off each other. It's relatively straightforward for the contracting parties as well, which I think is why it is popular. You know, the regulations only require some local tailoring for their adoption, and most of the effort is actually on the market surveillance that goes around that, training up the market surveillance, rather than in the administration in government. And EE funds, these are already either operational, planned, or proposed in almost all CPs, contracting parties. I say mainly they're funded by a mix of government budget and donors. Only Serbia has got that energy bill levy also going to it. I mean, there's an option, I think, through that kind of model, and I'll show in a moment one of the not currently so considered big ticket approaches, could be tenders. And so the kind of Portuguese or Swiss approach of instead of having all the obligated parties disaggregated in a distributed fashion, having their obligation, having that central tendering, but supported through energy bills, is another option. And might be an attractive one. Yes, I'd say at the moment the big constraints on the funds is simply their size. You know, we're talking about 10 million euro a year budgets, equating to 1 to 2 million a year. Often, it's not at a scale that's going to deliver a sizable chunk of the Article 7 targets, unless there was a bigger revenue stream going in there. And if they did become much bigger, then different approaches such as tendering might be a better model. So mention about tenders, that Portuguese or Swiss model. It's not something that we've had a lot of interest yet in, but I think it could become so, particularly as the renewable auction model is rolled out in the region. There might, some familiarity come through from that. It may help overcome the utility opposition because it's placing less upon them and getting more a wider range of players potentially involved. But it does still have quite a bit of administrative capacity requirements to draw up the tenderings, to run the tenders. And of course, you still need to fund it from somewhere. Taxation measures. I was interested in the previous presentation actually on Hungary because I think taxation measures is another area that's not been looked at in as much detail as perhaps it could be in the contracting parties. Big difficulty I've seen previously with taxation measures is evidencing genuine additionality and getting all the data that's needed from them because they're not really overcoming. Well, it depends how they're structured, but they're not usually overcoming that initial access to capital issue, which is one of the biggest market failures, particularly in the residential sector. They can also be quite complex to avail, depending upon the taxation system in the country in question, and potentially regressive because lower income households may not simply have a great enough tax bill with which to offset. So depending on how they're deployed and what they're focused on. But yeah, I think it is an area that's not perhaps been investigated enough by the contracting parties and could be looked at again. And lastly, large consumer obligations. So this is something Serbia's done, and I know Bulgaria had previously in place, whereby kind of leveraging off Article 8 and the auditing requirement there, actually placing a hard obligation upon large consumers themselves to undertake energy efficiency. And I think while you still have a high level of inefficient industrial consumption or similar, that there could be good scope in these obligations. Serbia's current methods for setting the target and evidencing the target are entirely insufficient for meeting the requirements of Article 7, but the concept is a valid one, and with better target setting design and monitoring and verification could be a major contributor for them. That's relevant for other contracting parties also. So one final slide. I think I'm doing all right for time. Yeah, just about. Roadmap for 2030 success. So yeah, it seems clear that there will need to be some new policy measures that can deliver at scale. Eco-design can't fill the full gap alongside some IFI financing programs in the manner and EU funds in the manner they are currently proposed. Energy efficiency obligation schemes remain a prominent and credible option. I wouldn't take them off the table just because we've had some difficulties in pushing them in or getting buy-in for them so far. They remain under consideration, but it'll take time to get that broad-based buy-in that we need, and we've seen that in other countries. As I think Croatia and Bulgaria are both good case studies there, where it's taken longer than was originally expected to get the necessary buy-in. I'm sure we'll hear more on the case studies shortly, but that they are now in operation well. Engagement of the utilities and regulators needed early stage to get that buy-in and groundwork. We need to be realistic on scope and targets, and I think that was one of the problems with 2020. The targets that an EEOS would have needed to help meet the 2020 targets were just unfeasible to stick in place within a 24-month timetable of trying to get them in up to speed. And that strong M&V platform is absolutely essential. Outside of EEOS, yes, funds have got a place, but if they're going to scale, there needs to be other ways of either leveraging those funds or funding the funds. And I think there's scope for more innovation. So we're going away from purely just grant-based processes, but also looking at things like on-bill and PACE loan type arrangements. Eco-design will continue to contribute strongly in the near term, but we have to consider that it's a good chance it becomes mandatory at some point, and would anyhow start to lose additionality, we would expect, as the general level of products increases in the contracting parties. And tenders is, as I mentioned, I think it's an avenue that's not been investigated enough as of yet, and may offer a workable alternative. Thank you all. I can't see feedback as you talk on these Zoom calls, so I hope everybody's not dropped off and found that an interesting enough overview.
Thank you, Dave. Nobody has dropped off, as far as I can see. So I think we're now at the Q&A session. I have to apologize because for some reason the option mute all participants is not working, or unmute all participants. So I had to unmute all of you individually, and I think everybody is now self-muted, which is a good thing. Are there any questions? Violetta had her hand raised. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, it's not a question, and I'm sorry I was missing the introduction of Dave. I was supposed to give him the glorious introduction, but then Borko was kind enough to step in. There was another call in parallel. But yes, indeed, I'm very pleased that we managed to get a bit of David's time today. For him, I know they are very, very, very busy these days. But not only that he's an expert in the topic, but he has been trying very hard to work with the countries, and not just, he only presented a bit of Western Balkans, but he did a great job with Ukraine, trying to present the possibilities, the options of having an EOS. I just wanted to put it into even more, the whole presentation somehow was depressing for me not because the presentation was not good, on the contrary, but the situation. And I think David mentioned a bit some of the causes for the situation. The energy community adopted the EED later than the EU, so actually only in 2015 in October, with 2 years for transposition. So basically the EED kicked in fact, in October 2017. And having a lighter version of targets, including for buildings renovation and the EOs, and a very, very limited time frame to implement this, of course, countries went for the easier option than the hard way, even to start setting a small scale obligation scheme. We've seen it. Some countries said, yes, I want to start and try it. And then when they saw the complex situation of putting it in place, they said, well, no, I cannot do that. But the other reason for which these are not particularly successful / popular in the Western Balkans, at least, it's because you have very few actors on the market. Most of the Balkan countries have no gas suppliers, except for basically Serbia, a bit in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and a bit in Macedonia, North Macedonia, but these are not significant players. And even in electricity, you have maybe 1 or 2 dominant players, and this is it. And that's why it's difficult to, when you look for obligated parties, you basically can obligate very few. Therefore, the competition between them, it's not a factor that would trigger the appetite for this kind of regulatory instruments. David also mentioned that you need a champion, you need a promoter, and you need a scheme administrator. And these countries, many of them, they don't even have an energy efficiency agency or a similar agency. So it's kind of complicated to imagine that a ministry of mining and energy or economic development would become the scheme administrator. That would be a bit cumbersome in my view. Interesting enough, we had in the early days in Moldova, there was an option to have the default option would have been an EO scheme. Only the obligated parties, and there were so many obligated parties, including fuel suppliers, the obligated parties were obliged to buy in. So there was an energy efficiency fund. He would collect the cost of the obligated parties, and the fund will invest for them. That stopped at the time when the agency and the fund merged. So now there is an energy efficiency agency with a fund function as well. But again, because it was late for them to put into the operation, they said, for now, we are going for the alternative policy measures. I think with that, I would like to conclude that the topic is still fascinating. And supposedly next year in 2021, the European Commission will propose to the energy community contracting parties the full clean energy package and the eco design, which will be a huge, well, let's put it like a huge, I don't know how to use the politically correct the term, but the countries will have an immense challenge, not only to amend the EEDs and the renewables and the EPBD and adopt the governance regulation, but also the eco design, and this will bring additional targets, higher targets, less flexibility, and then most probably at least part of these targets would need to be covered by an EO. Only policy measures certainly in most cases will not be enough. With this, I conclude my intervention. Thank you very much to the organizers for bringing us in. We always work very, very well with Croatian College and EHIP and Vesna in particular, and so it gives me great pleasure. And I will mute myself now. Thank you.
Thank you, Violeta, and thank you and Borko for co-organizing as well. Without you, we wouldn't have so many attendees today. David, I don't know if you have a comment, but Borko, you also have a question, right? If you want to ask it yourself or...
Just to unmute myself because I'm working on 2 computers, and
Okay.
So my question was related to this. Now in EU, it's strong promotion of renovation through this new renovation wave initiative, and also for Western Balkan countries, there is now also like a mirroring of this initiative through an extension of this similar initiative for Western Balkan. And my question was just related. So what are experiences or opportunities for Article 7 targets from this new EU initiative? So new financing possibilities, maybe for this energy households in energy poverty, or what are general opportunities and experiences? Thank you.
I mean, I could give my views on that, Borko. Just from working in Ireland, I don't think it's breaking confidence to say that retrofit and the retrofit ambitions that are in place, both in the broader climate action plan there and in their national energy and climate plan, is absolutely in mind in the consideration of the redesign of the EEOS and how the EEOS can be designed to better deliver that kind of endpoint retrofit ambition that Ireland has, rather than more incremental and disaggregated individual measures. So certainly I think Article 7 should be considered as a way of trying. Retrofits can undoubtedly be a target and a objective that's Article 7 looks to try and assist with. I think that's very clear.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have more questions?
No, questa
I think that Mr. Jashari has his mic on, but he's not talking to us. So, okay, if we don't have any questions left, there's going to be another Q&A session afterwards. I think we can start off with the case studies. And the first case study is by Tsvetomira Kulevska from Bulgaria, from the Sustainable Energy Development Agency. So I think you can start off with your presentation.
Right after I could share my screen.
Mm-hmm.
Don't see this opportunity though.
Okay, I'm searching.
Yeah, now I can see it. Yes.
Now we can see it.
Okay. Well, do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Hello again from my side. Thank you for the invitation and for the opportunity to present the energy efficiency obligation scheme in Bulgaria. I'm Sveti Kulevska, and I'm at the Sustainable Energy Development Agency in Bulgaria, which is the government body, the executive agency under the Ministry of Energy. And among all other our responsibilities, one of them is being the monitoring body for the EO scheme. SERA is also a project partner for the ENSMOV project. The national target EOS actually in Bulgaria, surprisingly enough for probably most of us, started in 2008. It was a little bit different than the introduced later on with the Energy Efficiency Directive in 2020, in 2012. Yes, this EOS was with a higher threshold for the energy suppliers, therefore less number of them. Also, as already you had a chance to hear from the David presentation, in this EOS, it was the large consumers, industrial consumers were included. The national target was updated in 2014 in accordance with the obligations introduced with the Article 7 of the EED. All those rules set by the directive were introduced in the national target, and as a result, you can see the target is quite, let's say, quite high. Bulgaria used the opportunity to exclude the transport sector from the baseline, and also we used the full reduction options under the directive, and it's lowered the target up to 25%. Currently, starting from 2016, we are using a mixed approach, energy efficiency obligation scheme plus alternative measures. I'll give you some more information about those alternative measures later on. As I already mentioned, the responsible authority for the policy, setting the policy, let's say, is the Ministry of Energy, and the managing authority of the Article 7 target is SEDA. The other key actors are, of course, the obligated parties. And you can see on this, we have basically 4 groups of obligated parties, but they don't have any limitations on the meaning of implementation of their target. The threshold is based on their annual sales to final consumers in terms of the type of energy they sell, like electricity and district heating. We have natural gas suppliers obligated. Also, we have liquid fuel suppliers, but their obligation is set only with excluding the transport fuels sold to the final consumers, which excludes pretty big number of companies. Only few of them are currently obligated. And the 4th group is the solid fuels suppliers. The options of the obligated parties basically are 2. They can implementing their individual targets, they can count on their own powers, or they can use help. Counting on their own powers means that they can offer energy efficiency service to the final consumers and measures directly to them. Of course, they can use help in that. They can use service provider, like working from their name. In this, they can contribute to energy efficiency and renewable sources fund or other financial intermediaries. This means that in this case, those financial intermediaries are exactly that. They just help to to the obligated parties to implement their targets. It's not the meaning of this energy efficiency fund is not an alternative measure under the Article 7. And also our obligated parties can have agreements with other obligated or not obligated parties to transfer energy savings. Some of the specifics of the scheme currently, banking and borrowing are allowed. Both of them are allowed only for the period, of course, current period of obligation. And we do apply penalties for non-achievement of the target. We call them only administrative penalties. So the sanction does not involve the obligation in this case. The eligible energy savings measures, as I said, pretty much we don't have any limitations to the opposed to the obligated parties. All measures, all actions that lead to verifiable or estimable energy efficiency improvement in final energy consumption are allowed. Energy efficiency actions are allowed in all sectors. They're not. We don't have sector targets. Of course, they must lead to energy savings, reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, and they should improve and preserve the quality of environment. We have some non-exhaustive list of energy savings measures with different sectors and their lifetimes as an annex to the bylaws, the energy efficiency law. A very important, let's say, subject is the monitoring of the obligation scheme. Basically, there are two main approaches of proving the energy efficiency measures implemented. One of them is the energy audit, which is, I believe, very well known. It's in Bulgaria, it can be done only by certified auditors, which are listed in the status public registers. And before being listed there, they have to meet very, very strict requirements, legislative requirements. So the energy audits, should say that the energy audits in Bulgaria are with quality. Energy efficiency measures implementation after the audit, and then again another audit, again done by another auditor, and also energy efficiency savings evaluation report should be produced after this this process. Of course, as you can as you can see, it's quite expensive procedure, and that's why there is another way of approving the energy efficiency measures implementation is by using so-called scale savings. We have a set of specialized methodologies approved by the Minister of Energy, and they also go before approving them. They also go for in a strict procedure of checking and approving. And those currently we have, I think, around 40 specialized methodologies, but the process is open, and they can be ad hoc. They can be produced ad hoc. So it's based on it's usually used when there is unique measures or only one or two measures, not a full, let's say, major renovation is done. And the evaluation of the savings is again based on a report done by certified energy auditor. Calculation template is available to each measure. And again, there should be an energy savings evaluation report. The verification of the savings is a quite, let's say, complex process. Well, you can see all the steps. The most important in this is that SEDA is the responsible institution that performs the overall control on all the energy savings implemented and reported to the institution, in our case to SEDA. And the verification process ends with issuing energy saving certificates to the obligated parties. Currently, the control of the verification is well, we do 100% control of submitted documents. There is currently no statistical proportion or representative sample, which is something quite administrative burden. And I'll give some more information on the plans for the next period when we hope this process will be facilitated. The energy saving certificates are quite often mistaken with the white certificates. No, they are not white certificates. They are exactly that, energy saving certificates. When they are owned by obligated parties, this is the only way they to prove the target implementation. And once issued, these certificates are automatically invalidated when savings are needed for the target implementation are reached. Any surplus of this energy saving certificates can be kept by the obligated parties for next year's, or can be offered to other obligated parties. When the certificates are owned by non-obligated parties, basically everyone can apply issuing an energy saving certificates if they meet the requirements and follow the procedure, the legislative procedure for that. And they all these non-obligated parties that have energy saving certificates, they can offer them to the obligated parties. There are no official rules for the exchange of these certificates. It's not a market mechanism as the white certificates, and they can be sold, of course, but also can be transferred free of charge. And we already have some examples of public-private partnership already realized based on energy saving certificates, and that's let's say a good example. As I promised, there is some information on the alternative measures. Up to 2016, there was an EOS on the government and municipal administrations, and also for the industrial side consuming more than 3 gigawatt-hours per year. These are so-called large consumers. They could be on enterprises, or they can be only industrial systems. In 2016 up to 2020, we have currently in progress the National Program for Energy Efficiency of Multifamily Residential Buildings. It's a fully grant program. It's actually 100% grant for energy efficiency measures in multifamily residential buildings in Bulgaria. By now, it's quite a successful one. And we think to continue its implementation, but with no more 100% grant anymore. Anyway, it started very well, and it's a good example for on national level. And last 2 years, there are 2 more financial mechanisms that are alternative measures. These are the Operational Program Innovation and Competitiveness, which is again, it has a grant component. It's up to 50%. And although industrial enterprise large consumers don't have any more individual energy savings targets, they are not anymore part of the energy efficiency obligation scheme. Now they are still included in the Article 7, but this time as an alternative measure. And the last one is the program area renewable energy, energy efficiency, and energy security under the European Economic Area financial mechanism. And you can see on the graph below, it's the share of the alternatives and the energy efficiency obligation scheme. It's a little bit more for the energy efficiency obligation scheme than to the alternatives. The progress is not very promising. Currently, we achieve less than 50% of the Article 7 obligation, and it's mostly on the alternative measures. Why is that happened? Main reasons are thinking out of the box is not the most popular activity among our obligated parties. It still is a little bit hard for them to find new business opportunities, to use market opportunities, to enlarge their businesses, and etc. Now, of course, there were some objective burdens, like some restrictions for obligated parties on the regulated market, although last few years started the liberalization of the market in Bulgaria, so we do not expect this to be an obstacle for the next period, or at least not such an obstacle as currently. We faced, especially in the beginning, when the energy efficiency obligations for the energy suppliers were imposed, we faced a huge lack of understanding, and it continued for several years, let's say. Of course, currently European funding is quite large, and it's not compatible especially for the public sector, is not compatible for any other financial opportunities. So less than 50% in 2019 looks not very well. That's why Bulgaria, currently we are discussing with the European Commission the possibility to use the Article 7, Paragraph 8 derogation in the Energy Efficiency Directive. We meet all of the requirements in this paragraph of the Article 7, and we have this new annual energy saving generated during the previous obligation scheme. The savings are calculated fully in accordance with Annex 5 of EED, and the years for which the savings were counted are already reported to the Commission with the NEOP and with the annual reports of the National Energy Efficiency Action Plans. In case of derogation, we will achieve more than 90% of the target of this period, 2014-2020. My last slide is on the plans ahead, we already have the national target set, of course, in the National Energy and Climate Plan, and it's much more, let's say, higher and significant than during the current period. It's based, of course, on one side because it's more years of implementation, more years of obligation, but also because of the transport sector consumption, which is included now in the baseline for the calculation of the target. We expect this to be quite a challenge for us, because a completely new group of obligated parties will be introduced. These are the fuel suppliers, and the energy efficiency law, the draft of the energy efficiency law, actually foresees pretty low threshold, and we expect a significant number of new group of obligated parties for which this obligation will be completely new. What's our part of some of our plans to facilitate the implementation of the EOS for the next period? We plan to introduce deemed savings, which will facilitate the procedure for demonstrating the energy savings. We also plan to a little bit to lower the administrative burden concerning the monitoring and verification, and with energy saving certificates, the procedure for the energy saving certificates issuing will be changed. Also, we plan to introduce more strict requirements on additionality. The share of the EOS for the new period will be lower. 16% according to the National Energy Climate Plan. We hope we will count more on alternative measures, and this time not only on grant schemes. In the National Energy and Climate Plan and also in the long-term renovation strategy, we have a provision for structuring a new national decarbonization fund, which will act as it will combine the European funding, grant schemes, but also private investments, including the obligated parties. We have a pretty good idea and also a scheme how that would happen, and we hope that this fund will be structured and will be fully functioning. Hopefully in the middle of 2022, which means quite in the beginning of the Article 7 target implementation. So that's from my side. Thank you for your attention, and we'll be happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you. I think we can go to the Croatian case study, and then we're going to take all the questions. So last but not least, Vesna from EAHB.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, pretty well.
Okay, so I should share my screen. Just don't know how. Did you? Yeah, I still don't have control, right?
Just a moment. Yeah, I can see you now.
Okay, so
and I made you the presenter, so I think
you
should be able to.
Yeah, so I should.
Yep, we can see your screen.
So, can you see my presentation now?
No, we can see now your screen. Now we can see it. Yep.
Okay. Do you see this presenter mode or full mode?
It's perfect. It's as it should be.
Okay.
So it's
okay.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Then fine. Then I will start, and thank you very much. I'm very glad to have this opportunity to present to you all the Croatian case of implementing Article 7 of Energy Efficiency Directive. I just hope that we will not finish this workshop in depressing manner, as Violeta said, because listening to Cveti and now knowing what's in my presentation, it might be a case. But anyhow, let me start and show you what have we done in Croatia. So I will briefly introduce you about our targets and legal framework for Article 7 obligations for this first period from 2014 to 20. Then I will show you impacts of alternative measures in this period, which are not final yet, of course, but still are very indicative. And also would like to share some experiences from first year of implementation of energy efficiency obligation scheme in Croatia. And then for the last part of the presentation, just a slight taste of future, or what we can expect, or what are our targets for next 10-year period. Some lessons learned, of course, will be summarized at the end, and I hope that they will be useful. So let me start with the targets of Article 7 for the previous period or current period. As Cveti also said, when setting the target, we have used the opportunity to decrease this target, which was enabled in that version of energy efficiency directive. So we used the maximal possible reduction of cumulative savings, so 25%, which led us to our cumulative target of 54.25 petajoules of energy savings cumulative that we need to achieve, or on annual basis this is close to 2 petajoules. This was all defined in our NIEPs, and NIEPs also defined that this target is to be achieved with a combination of alternative measures and energy efficiency obligation schemes. So this was decided already in 2014, and the shares are more or less 50-50. However, although obligation scheme was announced in our energy efficiency law already in 2014, we waited a long time for the system to be established, and meaning to adopt necessary secondary legislation which will define in more details how the energy efficiency obligation scheme would be implemented in real life. So basically, our main legislative act in energy efficiency field is law on energy efficiency. This law actually referred to NIEPs as the main policy documents where targets are defined, and where also alternative measures are defined, and it introduced energy efficiency obligation scheme, but only in 2019 with more specific obligation to energy suppliers. And when I say energy suppliers, I mean all suppliers of electricity, gas, heat, and oil products. And the scheme was or is implemented, introduced gradually, meaning that first ones in the energy efficiency obligation scheme were those who delivered 300 or more gigawatt hours of energy to their final consumers. Next year, the threshold is 100 gigawatt hours, and final is 50 gigawatt hours, and below that energy suppliers will not be part of energy efficiency obligation scheme. Two pieces of secondary legislation are important for the operation of both energy efficiency obligation scheme, but also alternative measures. First is, as the name states, regulation on energy efficiency obligation scheme, which provides details on how to account energy savings, how to trade or transfer energy savings, although this is honestly not developed in details. It also prescribes how annual reporting of obligated parties should look like, and it also prescribes the penalty payment for under achievement. Maybe it's important to emphasize that, as you know, we do have energy efficiency fund, and all penalties that are to be paid from obligated parties will go into this fund, and the fund is obligated to invest that money into alternative measures. Another important piece of legislation is regulation on monitoring and verification of energy savings, which established our internet platform MVP, or we call it SMIV, as an obligatory tool for monitoring of energy savings, and basically all subsidy providers, meaning energy efficiency fund or any other subsidy provider, obligated parties, public sector entities, and ESCOs are obliged to enter enter data about implemented projects in this platform. I'm emphasizing this platform as a GIZ, as you all know, actually supported the development of this platform, and we are actually using it in practice. And the Ministry of Economy and Sustainable Development, their energy efficiency department is now administering this system and is updating it regularly to meet the needs that are increasing, but about that a little bit later. Also, in this regulation, there are bottom-up methods for calculation of energy savings prescribed for 33 measures, but similarly, as Cveti said, for Bulgaria, this is not non-exhaustive list of measures, meaning if some measures are not in that list, there is still a possibility to report about that measures and to claim savings, but these savings should be calculated by also certified energy auditor, and the calculation method should be clear and transparently shown. Yeah, and now this is briefly about this legal system, and now to alternative measures. I'm not sure how much do you see them, but this is actually the result of the analysis that we performed from SMIV or from MVP, and majority of data is entered by our energy efficiency fund, and the alternative measures that have been implemented in this last period were energy renovation programs of single-family houses, multi-apartment buildings, introduction of individual heat metering before it became a legal obligation. We plan to have some energy poverty reduction programs, but they have started only this year. So the results are not still available. Then we had energy renovation of public buildings, energy renovation of commercial buildings, energy renovation of public lighting, implementation of energy efficiency measures in manufacturing industry, and some measures directed to transport, like energy efficient vehicles, dominantly subsidies for electric vehicles, then eco-driving trainings, and also you see here on this slide two measures that were stated as alternative measures in our NIAP, but their impacts have still not been evaluated. This is special tax on motor vehicles, which has a component to penalize more the vehicles that are environmentally less friendly, and to stimulate vehicles that use alternative fuels. And also city bikes systems, which is a measure very widespread in our local communities. So the methodology how to evaluate savings from this measure is still unknown, or is being developed. But as you may see, we summarized all data from all projects that were entered in our platform, and you can see here at the bottom of the page cumulative savings, which are in period 14-19 7.7 petajoules, and in a period 14-20 around 10 petajoules. So I know that this doesn't mean anything to you, but here is why it's important. We had almost 15,000 projects in our platform, and this analysis was done in June 2020. And the achievements are maybe, as Violeta said, a bit depressing, because with these measures you can see that we have achieved less than 20% of our total target for Article 7, and less than 40% of target for alternative measures, given these approximately 50-50 shares. What is even more depressing is that huge amount of money, at least for Croatian circumstances, was invested in these alternative measures. We are talking only about public money from Energy Efficiency Fund and from European structural and investment funds. And you may see these numbers that in this period, more than 200 million euros from national fund was invested through grants, subsidies, and from European structural and investment funds, which we started to utilize in 2016. More than 400 million euros was invested in energy efficiency projects. Just about the distribution of these funds, for instance, from European funds, we had more than 200 million for public sector buildings. We had more than 100 million euro for multi-apartment buildings. We had 60 million euros for industry, 40 millions for commercial buildings in tourism and trade. So the numbers are huge. And we still have one alternative measure that was not presented in that table, and this is the introduction or implementation of energy management information system, and in general energy management system in the public sector, which comprises many activities, energy consumption being monitored through this SEMIS system, only one of these activities. We are still evaluating the impacts of this measure, but since this measure is actually introduced a long time ago with UNDP's support, we did have the request from European Commission to explain the additionality of this measure. What is quite problematic is that in our NIAB, the estimation of savings that this measure will bring is 10 petajoules, which you can now compare with this 10 petajoules from actual investment projects. So this is something which we need to solve and see the actual savings and the possibility to claim them by the mid next year. We need to see how it goes. Regarding the use of MIV system or MVP or our SMIV, so the use of platform, I would say that it is very good to have it. We are happy to have it because it is actually a database of all projects that are implemented with state support. So all projects that are implemented under alternative measures. Of course, it's not perfect. There are many issues that can be improved, but they can be improved in operation. Most of these improvements should go into direction of lessening the errors, possible errors that can be made while entering data into the system. Also, there is an issue of double counting. Double counting is not solved in any software manner currently. So basically, let's say manual checking of double counting is done, or it's done in outside the platform in Excel. So this is one issue that we are looking also how to improve. And of course, there are the issues in differences of energy savings that we have noticed, which are calculated using these bottom-up methods or estimations, and in project documentation that are delivered by the implementers of projects. So this is briefly about alternative measures, and now regarding our experience from energy efficiency obligation scheme. So we had in 2019 25 obligated parties with their affiliated companies. So we are looking to for instance, our electric utility, it has four affiliated companies that are obliged parties, but they can report as one company. That's the meaning of these affiliated companies. So in 2020, we will have 31 obligated parties in the system. And in this first year, so the first year when when implementation of the system started was 2009, and obligated parties entered in our platform more than 900 measures, meaning more than 900 projects or activities. And analysis of these entries is summarized in this table, and you may see that our obligated parties, because some of them are, or two of them are also companies that have oil and electricity production. They reported also measures in transformation, in energy transformation, for instance, oil refineries. And when you summarize this achievement, you see maybe the best is to look only at the bottom line. You see that when we exclude these measures in transformation, we are way below our target for the period 2014-2020. Although obligated parties were allowed to report all measures that were implemented in the period 2014-2019. So in end use, only 4.5 petajoules were reported. Cumulative savings. This is one of the reasons why is that actually obligated parties opted for easy measures that have short lifetimes, like some information activities, like additives to fuels, to oil products. So we are missing the cumulative effect of more, let's say, serious energy efficiency measures. But the scheme goes on. So we are now in the second year, but the effects of this second year will be even worse due to COVID situation and a lack of activities. So basically, the hopes for increasing these numbers from energy efficiency obligation scheme, at least for 2020, are not very high. But the scheme will go on in the next period as well. So we are now in the process of amending energy efficiency law. And in that law, probably obligated parties will not only have annual targets but also cumulative targets. Also, it will be clarified that alternative measures and obligation schemes should not overlap. Also, there is a clear need to define in a bit more details trading of energy savings. Also, penalties will be prescribed in number, meaning that they will be known in front for obligated parties. And also we have included some parts. They are already included in existing law, that all actions that are directed towards energy poor households can benefit from increased savings from 10 to 30%. This is the only stimulation that we have in the system, but this is not obligation. We don't have actually any other forms of obligations within the system, meaning we don't have a target for households or for public sector or for transport. Basically, obligated parties can do whatever they can and are willing to do. And that's it from the maybe just a reflection on energy efficiency obligation scheme. It is very hard to implement. You are facing actually the suppliers, energy companies that are in first part. They are always looking how to avoid the obligation and how to well, let's say cope with the obligation in the most easy manner. But now things are changing, and actually the Article 7 and energy efficiency obligation scheme is very hot topic, because suppliers are now very well aware of the fact that the system will go on, and they are even preparing their plans for the next 10-year period. So the next 10-year period is very ambitious. In terms of targets, we no longer have NEAPs. We now have NECP, National Energy and Climate Plan, which is the now main policy document for energy efficiency also. In that document, we have defined our targets in terms of primary and final energy consumption, and ambition of these targets is estimated by European Commission as low, but there is also very low. So we are very happy that we are not very low, but low. No, joking aside, achieving these targets will be very demanding and challenging. Article 7 target is much higher, not only because we have a longer period, but because of the methodology methodology of target calculation change in new version of the directive. So we are now facing the target of 125 petajoules versus this 54. We defined alternative measures in our NECP. We evaluated ex ante, of course, their impacts, and according to that, 70% of Article 7 target for the next period remains to be achieved by energy efficiency obligation scheme. Just briefly, I will not go into details here, but we defined quite a lot energy efficiency measures in our NECP. Transport measures are defined in dimension of decarbonization, so not in energy efficiency dimension. And the structure of our energy efficiency measures looks something like this. So one part is energy efficiency obligation scheme. Then we have a strong focus on renovation programs again. So multi-apartment, single-family, public sector, cultural heritage buildings, we plan to have programs for their renovation with, again, some form of financial support. Focus remains also on public sector, and for business sector, we are considering tax reliefs. I'm very glad that Ivana presented this Hungarian case, and I think we will look into it in more details. As I said, cumulative savings 125 petajoules, and the distribution between energy efficiency obligation scheme in the first row and the most important alternative measures is given here in this table. We calculated this expected annual energy savings from these programs based on some assumptions, how much buildings we will renovate each year. We did a quite detailed calculation. If you I will not go into these details, but we can actually discuss it later. But what is important is that we are now predicting that these energy renovation programs will, on annual basis, achieve these numbers. So let's just look at multi-apartment buildings. We are planning to have 0.15 petajoules annually, while on average in the last period we achieved 1.12. So basically on annual basis we need to be much more ambitious and maybe even much more effective to achieve the targets in the next period. So what are the lessons learned from all of this? And I really don't want to finish in depressing tone. Article 7 is tough. It's really tough. It has been tough for this period. It will be even tougher for next period. And in light of announced changes in energy efficiency directive, in the light of new targets for the European Union, we can only expect that it will be even tougher. But according to our experience, Article 7 has become actually the single most important driver for energy savings, and we are talking of both alternative measures and energy efficiency obligation schemes. What may be a problem is that energy efficiency obligation scheme must compete, or at least had to compete with grant-based alternative measures. Meaning that when we talk, let's say, about energy renovation of buildings, when people know that there is a grant scheme, then they are only focusing on this grant scheme and not other possibilities. So this is really a huge issue, and I think Cveti also mentioned it in Bulgaria, that this is also the case, and it needs to be reconciled somehow. My message also from our experience is that platform, that MIV system is really critical for monitoring process. Is not in Croatia, it is not nearly perfect, but it works, and it's useful, and continuous upgrades of the platform is needed to remove issues that arise on everyday basis as problems. And finally, money. Money is, of course, the most important aspect in energy efficiency implementation, and what we have seen, and you have seen from our example, that huge amounts of money are needed. And basically, public sources, they are great, and at EU level, lots of new funding possibilities are opening, but still it will not be enough, and the engagement of private capital, whether through obligated parties, through ESCOs, through all other stakeholders that can implement energy efficiency measures is highly needed. And for countries like Croatia, which was strongly focused on the grants and subsidies for stimulating energy efficiency, it will be hard period to switch from strictly grant-based to some more innovative mechanisms and financial instruments. So this is also something that we will need to cope with. But I think it's important that things are moving forward, that energy efficiency is really high, not only on political agenda, but also on business agenda, especially through the introduction of energy efficiency obligation scheme, and that all these efforts will deliver targets, or at least part of these targets. So that's it from my side. I hope I didn't overstep the time limits, and I thank you for your attention, and would be glad to answer any question you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Vesna. We're right on time, 12:30. So if anybody has questions or comments for any of the presentation that were held.
I have a question for Vesna, if you can hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
You mentioned that the to date obligated parties, due to the kind of short time horizon and annual accounting, have gone for the behavioural measures as a kind of lowest hanging fruit. How optimistic are you at their ability to step up and their willingness to step up to those more substantial hard measures, as we might call them, in the next period?
Well, actually, thank you for this question. As I mentioned, we are now in the process of amending energy efficiency law, and in this law, the proposal is to introduce these cumulative targets for obliged parties. So with that, that would be like, let's say, stimulation for them to implement measures that have longer lifetimes. We just had public discussion, and within that public discussion, of course, several workshops with dominantly obliged parties were held, and they're not happy with that, but then they are not strongly against it as I have expected. Really, I expected that it will be removed from the law immediately because of their pressure, but that didn't happen. One of the possibilities maybe is that lots of them are now starting their programs, for instance, for photovoltaics. It's a questionable how much energy savings we can claim according to guidelines of every European Commission from photovoltaics. But still according to our legislation, they can claim savings from photovoltaics, which is now huge. And practically every electricity supplier is offering photovoltaics installation for their customers, so they see a possibility there. I hope this will stimulate them. I'm not very optimistic about measures that are, and I think Borko asked that at the beginning, about energy renovation of buildings, and especially about deep renovation of buildings. But I think that this will be possible. What is also very important, what happened now in Croatia just a few days ago, is that actually our Chamber of Economy has become very, very active in promotion of energy efficiency obligation scheme. Why? Because Chamber of Economy has as their members lots of industrial facilities, and industrial facilities are actually doing energy efficiency measures, and no one knows about them because they're doing it for themselves, for their increase of productivity, lessening energy costs, and so on. And so basically now the market is starting to develop. Now the industrial facilities are aware that they can do something and sell the savings to the obliged parties. And the Chamber of Economy is now looking to establish a trading platform to meet the supply and demand. So basically, in that respect, I'm let's say optimistic. I think that there is a strong possibility to develop or awaken the market of energy savings. Yeah, I hope I answered your question and brought a little bit optimism.
Very much so. Very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
If I may just say so, that we are here at disposal for any questions even after this event. I think we quite know each other well, so feel free to contact us, whole ENSMOV consortium, and all of us to if you have any questions, and we can help with our experience, which are not perfect but are honest. and I think that's important to share. I think we have some chat. Okay.
Yeah, that was before, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah. I hope everybody's unmuted or self-muted. So if there are no questions or comments, we have nothing more on the schedule. So we would like to thank everybody who has participated. This has been recorded, so a recording of the webinar will also be available. And I think the presentations will also be available if the presenters do not mind. So I think,
we do.
Yeah. I think this is it. Thank you. If you have any additional questions, feel free to send them by email. And the attendance was not bad. And pretty much everybody stuck around for the whole webinar, which is also a success.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you to all the presenters. Thank you, and hopefully we'll be in touch. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Bye.